Hey guys, it's Ryan from All Mine Ranch doing another video. This is a continuation of the last video in which I shared my journey to becoming an off-grid prepping homesteader in the middle of the desert. This follow-up is to go more into the mindset and how my thinking has evolved and how I hope your thinking is evolving when it comes to preparedness and resiliency and self-reliance and those kinds of concepts. So let's just dive into it. I got a lot of material to cover. I have no idea if it's all going to come together in a cohesive way, but I'm going to do my best to share my thoughts with you in a way that will help you be better prepared to weather whatever challenges that life brings you. Okay, let's lose the glasses there. My dog's walking around. My dog Stanley is keeping me company here, so if I seem a little distracted, it's because he's down here sniffing my damn crotch. Go lay down, Stanley. Okay, so, and if you hear shaking noises, that's him brushing off the dust. He loves to roll in the dust. Anyway, as I've gotten older, I've discovered that I'm a prepper, or something pretty close to a prepper. And that was a journey that took a long time. And in looking back on it, I've been trying to figure out how I got to this place that I'm at of being really into preparedness, not so much survivalism, but resilient, self-reliant, and able to throw whatever life throws at me. And when I start to think about how I got here and in what other areas of my life, beyond having my off-grid desert homestead here, in what other ways do I actually, try to be prepared? And I've come to realize I do it in almost everything I do. And I wasn't always that way. So how did I come to be a prepper? Why you should be thinking about this too. Okay, let's start with my career in cybersecurity because I think this will sort of help lay a foundation here. I've been in IT most of my adult life, except when I've gone off and done entrepreneurial things for years at a time. Some of them quite long periods of time, but I always came back to IT. And the last time I came back to IT, I very intentionally went into cybersecurity, and I'm very glad that I did. Specifically cloud security, because cloud computing is a trend and cybersecurity is a trend. And I figured if I position myself career-wise where two big trends are converging, my skills will be in demand, I can maximize my income, and thereby maybe not have to work until I'm 80 years old. And so far, things have gone according to plan. I've been in cybersecurity now for 4 years. But with that said, as I've learned about cybersecurity, one of the big concepts in cybersecurity is layered defenses. That's also a concept when it comes to like home security or warfare and things like that. But if you have an asset, you want to have layers of defenses around. That's Stanley. You want to have layers of defenses around it. So if any one of those layers or defenses fail, you've got backup layers of defenses. And the more layers of defenses or different types of defenses you have, the harder it is for an attacker to get to that system or that thing, that asset that you're trying to protect. And I think everybody should look at themselves and their finances and their lifestyle and their family as an asset that you need to defend. And when you start thinking of it from that perspective and start thinking through what are the layers of defenses that I could possibly erect, it opens up a whole world of study of things to learn about and explore, because there are major facets of our lives, right? A lot of people are religious and they try to conduct themselves in a way to prepare for some kind of afterlife, so they get the good afterlife. Well, I'm not very religious, and I think people should be putting at least that much effort, if not a whole lot more, into preparing for this life, so when things get challenging, you're not screwed, okay? So cybersecurity lends itself to defense, layered defenses, or defense in depth. I also started thinking about my history in the Navy. I was on a ship for almost 3 years, a destroyer based out of Pearl Harbor. I was trained in sonar and the signatures of Russian submarines back in the tail end of the Cold War in 89, 90, 91. And that skill is not very useful in the real world. But one thing that I did learn from the Navy is when you're out to sea, there's no one coming to save you. If you have a fire on board the ship, it is up to the systems on the ship and the training and the crew members, your shipmates, to put out the fire. or whether it's a torpedo attack, a fire, your steering system goes out, your turbines, your diesel generators shut down, you better have spare parts, fuel, training, people, intelligence, fortitude, and resiliency to repair those systems and get them back online, or you're going to be out there floating for quite a while. Now, in some scenarios, yes, you could be rescued by a tugboat or another naval ship or something like that. But if it's a serious scenario, like an outbreak of a major fire on a ship, there's no fire department coming to your rescue. So I think I learned at the age of 18 some fundamental mindset things around being prepared that I didn't even realize at the time I was learning. Like it sunk in deep at some level. I'll tell you a story. When I moved to Idaho, 7 years ago or whatever it was, 6 years ago, almost 10 years ago, maybe. It was over 10 years ago. Doesn't matter. I met a bunch of people in the burner community, meaning people who are artists and free thinkers who go to Burning Man. And I decided to go. And my first year at Burning Man, a guy in the camp that I was staying in said to me, "Ryan, you are the best prepared virgin I've ever met." And I took that as a really big compliment. By virgin, he meant first timer at Burning Man. And Burning Man, if you don't know, is a huge, massive art and music, cultural festival out in the desert in a very severe environment. And there's no facilities out there. You have to bring your own food. You have to bring your own water. You got to figure out your own toilet situation, your own shower situation. You can't leave anything there. You have to pack everything out, whatever you bring in. Not everybody follows that rule. There's some douchebags that leave trash and garbage, and other people like me who are responsible come in and help clean up after those idiots. But you have to learn self-reliance if you're going to spend a week out in the desert in very harsh environments, right? So when he called me the best prepared virgin he ever met, I felt really good about that because I did not want to be that guy who has the ability to research what you need to survive and thrive at Burning Man, but just ignore it and then turn around and expect other people to provide for me. I didn't want to be that guy. And not only did I want to provide for myself, but if somebody else ran into trouble, I would like to have some tools or equipment or supplies and skills that might help somebody else. So I can see, looking back, how being prepared in advance for all kinds of potentialities really was internalized prior to even discovering, prepping and survival and all that stuff that I sort of identify with more so today. So, and finances as well. I believe that you need to make every dollar work for you. Now I believe that. When I was younger, I spent money as fast as I got it. I mean, literally, my parents would give me my $10, a week allowance, which I thought was a good amount of money at the time, although I had to do a few hours of chores per week to earn that. But they would give me a $10 bill, usually on a Sunday afternoon after church, after all my chores were done for the week. And it would literally be gone within 2 hours. I'd run to the convenience store, I'd cash it into quarters, and I would start plugging it into video game consoles and pinball machines. And eventually, as I got a little older, cigarettes and weed and things like that. Sorry, Mom. But that's the truth. And I would spend that money that fast. I lived like that. Not quite to that extreme, but I got myself in debt in the Navy that took me years to pay off. I never lived by a budget, and it really wasn't till I ran into serious trouble with the IRS because I mismanaged my money when I made a lot of it that I realized a budget is actually a godsend tool, and that you need to have a monthly spending plan so that every dollar that comes into your hands is maximized. Now, some of your dollars go to food, some of them go to, bills, some go to debt, some might be saved for your retirement, hopefully. Some might just be saved for next week for a TV or a vacation or something like that. But the point is, There are both short-term, like immediate needs, there are longer-term needs, there are desires, and there's really long-term desires. And if you don't think through what your priorities are, you're not going to be a conscious spender. And if you're not a conscious spender, you're probably frivolously wasting money on things that will really bring you no long-term benefit. So it took me into my early 40s or mid 40s before I realized that you have to prepare with your money. So every month I have a budget. I don't even like that term. I have a spending plan, and it has a category for everything. And before I even get that check, I know how much my check is going to be because I'm a salary man, as they say. I know exactly where it's going. And the nice thing is I have the flexibility to change my mind on the fly. If I want to buy $100 on a tool that I didn't plan for, well, I can deduct, that from another category. Now, I might also make the decision to go into debt for it and pay that off next month, but I don't do that without a lot of thought and, understanding the repercussions of what it really means to go into debt, which is trading future energy for present moment pleasure or consumption. That's really what debt is. And if you do too much of that, you're basically mortgaging your future. And I did that for decades, and I'm just not willing to do it anymore. Especially now that I'm, in my 50s and I don't have, multiple decades to just labor and work hard to make up for lost ground. I'm at a stage of my life where I really need to maximize every penny. So when I look at how I manage my money and invest and save in a 401k or invest in building out my homestead, I see the value of just investing in general, of spending my money on a solar panel so that I can generate permanent power or generate power in the future without having to pay someone else to do it. Yes, it's expensive to buy panels and batteries, and this is just one example, but by investing in systems that will provide me a long-term benefit, I maximize my future, I minimize how much hard work I'll have to do and for how long, and I just generally improve my life. So you've got to think through what you really want out of life and apply it to your finances. And that means having a monthly spending plan. So finances actually plays into preparedness quite a bit, especially when retirement is a light at the end of the tunnel. So investing and budgeting going hand in hand, as do preparedness. Now let's talk about resiliency for a minute. Resilience, I don't have a formal definition of it, but it means able to withstand stress or attack or calamity or challenges and come out in reasonably good shape, okay? So I've learned that I want to be resilient. I certainly don't want to be fragile and easy to damage. And so by having some money in savings, like a 6-month emergency fund, it magically, not only does it create resiliency, but it seems to tell the universe to bring you more abundance because you're being a good steward of your financial and physical resources. But resiliency means for me, not only thinking through some of those threats, like from a layered defense cybersecurity perspective that I already mentioned, but then acting on that and putting systems and defenses and things into place to create that resiliency. So a simple example would be, since I live in the desert and I'm doing off-grid homesteading, I have 5,000 gallons of water on hand right now, which for a single guy and a dog, that's a good amount of water. But what if I had more ability to catch water and store water? That would create water resiliency. And what if I started growing my own food at some point and having fruit trees and vegetables so I'm not dependent on supply chains that are easily disrupted, as we're now discovering in 2022. Supply chains are in tatters and they could get worse. If you don't have food, water, and some supplies on hand, you're not going to be resilient. You could be up shit creek without a paddle if things get bad enough. So having things on hand to withstand those potential rigors is what resiliency means to me. And I'm discovering that my single highest pleasure or my purpose, my focus, my mindset has now been, for the last few years, absolutely on creating resiliency. Now, am I perfect at it? Am I done? Hell no. It's an ongoing journey. You never get done. You have to start where you are and make small improvements, and that's all you can do. And maybe in some future videos, I'll talk about, how an apartment dweller or a city dweller can take steps to improve their resiliency, even if they're not changing their surroundings. Now, for me, I'm an off-grid homesteader now, and it's this physical environment and the 22 acres that I'm on and the resources with the rain and the sunlight and things like that that are helping me create some resiliency. But you certainly don't have to be an off-grid homesteader to create resiliency in your life. So bringing resiliency to my life is a super high priority now. And one of the concepts that goes hand in hand with that is redundancy. There's a phrase in prepper circles and in the military and with campers and people who go into extreme environments that says 2 is 1 and 1 is none. And by that you mean if you have one way to create fire or create electricity and it goes out, you have none. And there's a good chance that is actually going to happen. So if you have 2 methods, well, actually it's like having 1. And if you have 3 methods, it's like having 2. So let me give you an example of that. I'm living off of solar power, right? And I'm dependent on on battery storage. And batteries, unfortunately, are still pretty expensive. And I've invested thousands of dollars in my batteries, and I've got more thousands to continue to invest if I really want to have a lot of power on hand. But I need backup systems to that in case the sun is not shining for extended periods. So maybe I need a generator. Maybe I need firewood. And if I have a generator, which I do, maybe it would be nice to have it be able to run on both propane and gasoline in case I run out of one or the other. And what if my parts for the generator, or what if it fails and I don't have spare parts, I'm out of luck? Well, maybe I want a backup generator. So I have all of those things. I actually have a solar system for the tiny house. I have a completely independent solar system for my cargo trailer that I can use as a big, battery bank to fall back on. And I use that for my main house for my construction, that power source. So that's really nice. And I have 2 generators, and one of them is dual fuel that takes both propane and gasoline. So you see my point. I'm not going to belabor that one. But when it comes to generating power, I can't count on Arizona Power Supply. I can't count on Encore if you live in Texas. As you saw last year, you had some pretty cold days where the entire Texas power grid went down hard for days after they assured us that it never would happen. Things happen. Shit happens. I want to not only be resilient, I want to have redundancy in my preparations so that if something fails, I have a backup. And I look for ways to do that in every, facet of my life. I have a laptop computer. If that drops, well, I have a tablet. If that drops, I have a smartphone, right? So that's 3 different types of computers there. And you can go on and on. When it comes to food, I do have grocery stores I can rely on. And you can generally rely on, but what if you can't rely on them? What if there's a power outage for, an extended period of time so that the gas pumps don't operate? Well, that means trucks aren't going to be on the road delivering food to your grocery store. So if you don't have some food on hand or food out in your garden to rely on, you could very quickly find yourself in a situation of lack and dependent on others. And again, that's why I like to be prepared, because I don't want to be that guy that is dependent on others. And I hope you don't want to be that person that is dependent on the kindness of others. Because if things really do hit the fan, guess what? It's kind of every man for himself. If you've got a family down the street with 6 kids and they have a lot of food on hand and you come knocking on their door because you don't have access to food, and if they have to make a decision between feeding their own kids or feeding you, they're going to tell you to hit the road. And they might even put a gun in your face to encourage you to hit the road and go knock on the next door. You don't want to be in, the second to last man standing in a game of food musical chairs. I didn't say that very well. Food musical chairs. You don't want to be left without a chair or left without food, right? Okay, so you got to think about these things because we no longer live in a world where the chances of calamity happening are small. The chances are really good between political unrest, pandemics, global warming, extreme weather, extreme fires, extreme hurricanes, potential, and I've glossed right over the political unrest, but we've seen that, it doesn't take much to incite people to storm the freaking Capitol building and, stage an insurrection, and it's likely they won't be held accountable, unfortunately. But I'm not going there. Let's just say that back in the 70s and in the 80s, when I was a kid in the 80s and coming of age in the 90s, the chances for that type stuff of happening were actually pretty small. That's no longer the case. Nowadays, the chances of some of or many of those things happening even simultaneously are actually really high. I will also point out that although I might be a little bit extreme in my views about preparedness, resiliency, redundancy, self-reliance, and all of those things, I'm not alone in it. There are millions of people in the country, out of hundreds of millions, so it's a very small percentage, who think every day about how they can be prepared for almost any eventuality. And it's not just the preppers, it's the Red Cross, it's FEMA, it's all these government organizations. If you go to their websites and look, they'll tell you that you need to be prepared. You need to have 2 or 3 days of water, at the very least, especially if you live near the coast where there's hurricanes. You should have a few days of food and water and a generator at the very least. If you don't, you're just a sitting duck, and it's just a matter of time. So I want to impress upon you, take some damn actions. If you live like I just came from Texas, or the Midwest, where there's a very real threat of a big tornado ripping through your neighborhood, not only do you need to have a tornado shelter, but if those power lines go down anywhere in your vicinity, you may have no drinking water, you may have no food, you may fire, heat, whatever. You need to be prepared for tornadoes. And the list goes on and on. If you're anywhere in this country nowadays, you have the risk of extreme ice storms, extreme snowstorms, not to mention, since I'm in cybersecurity, cyber attack. Let's go ahead and go there for a minute, okay? Since I am in cybersecurity for a big corporation that is in the financial services sector, I see updates and bulletins literally every day about what is going on both in the United States and globally from a cyber security perspective. And I'm not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form when I say there are domestic terrorist groups, there are international terrorist groups, there are nation states, every nation state, North Korea, Iran, Russia, China, Israel, even, France and Britain and Germany, who we call our allies, for Americans anyway, those nation states are engaged in cyber espionage, and they are actively probing every kind of system we have for weaknesses so that they are prepared to exploit those weaknesses if need be. The days of conventional warfare are almost over. Not completely. I mean, look at Russia right now as I film this video. They're amassing troops on the Ukrainian border and about to invade the Ukraine. But that style of warfare is going away rapidly, and the next major conflict in the world is 99.99% certain to be cyber warfare. And because our financial world is internet-based, our banking relies on the internet and communication lines, if a cyber attack really brings down, whether it's the DNS system, which is the domain name system, or some major backbone routers or switches, or just brings down a couple of big banks, our financial system is going to collapse. It may be temporary, but it's going to collapse. So your money is at risk, or your access to money, your ability to get to use an ATM, to use even cryptocurrencies, is at risk. And there are hundreds of nation states actively looking to exploit the weaknesses of whatever country you live in, not to mention the terrorists and the bad guys. And there isn't a week that goes by where there isn't some kind of attack on a utility system, a water system, an oil pipeline, etc. Now, if you live in an insulated, insular little world where you don't read about that stuff, you may not even realize it's going on. But I read about it, and I don't obsess about it, but I can assure you there is an extremely good chance somewhere in the next 5 years, there's going to be a large-scale cyber attack from someone. I don't know who, and I don't know what it's going to affect, but the chances of the internet going down, the chance of our power grids in the United States of going down for an extended period of time, I believe, is actually really high, much higher than you know. And so for me, it's not really a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And when there is a cyber attack that takes down our grid and possibly our water systems, possibly all the airline systems, travel, finance, food production, food delivery, communications, all of that is going to be screwed, at least for a few days, if not for a few months. I'm serious about this, guys. It's not a far-fetched thing. If you read the right reports and look at the right government websites, you'll see that they're basically saying this is going to happen. They just don't want to cause panic among the citizenry, but they recommend you be prepared too. So none of us can be perfect in our preparations, but you can be better than you were the day before. You can make continuous improvements. You can draw up a list of the basics. And there is a diagram when it comes to preparedness that just looks like a set of concentric rings, right? If you were to actually do it draw it out. And think of it this way. In the center is the basics, having a few days of food and supplies on hand. And then the next ring outside from that would be having, say, 2 weeks to 30 days supply. And the next ring out from that is 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, a year, etc. In a perfect world, all of us would have all the preparations we need and all of the systems in place to be 100% self-reliant out to infinity. But the reality is that's not going to happen for me. It's not going to happen for you. But you can go from wherever you're at today. If you are literally relying on store-bought water and you have a few days worth or maybe a week's worth, you can improve on that. You can double your water. You can put some 5-gallon jugs in the back of your closet. There's just so much you can do, and there's lists. It's not like you have to think through all of this yourself and figure out like what the next level of preparedness would be for you. You just have to go out on the internet and find the information and then invest a little bit of time and energy into starting your preparations. So with all that said, the chances of needing to be self-reliant are extremely high and getting bigger and higher every day. So I'm not just out to lunch. From an economic standpoint, I've also been studying, I came at it originally from just purely an investment perspective. How do I take a little bit of money from every paycheck and put it into a 401k, and what fund or what stock or what bond or, could I put my 401k into to grow my money so in case Social Security is not there, which by the way, you can start drawing Social Security in the United States at 62. I'm about to turn 51, so that's 11 years away. If it's still there in 11 years, I'll be shocked. I am assuming it's not going to be there at all, or if it's there, the benefits will be so paltry that it's really not going to impact my life. They might be able to cut the checks, but if inflation is rampant and a loaf of bread is $50, that $800 a month or whatever you get from Social Security is not going to go very far. So I'm assuming it's not going to be there at all. So I've been looking at investing to figure out how I can be financially self-reliant at some point. And I started that about 5 years ago. And now fast forward 5 years later to today, I know that our financial system, the banking system, the central banking system, it's all based on debt. We're generating such a massive amount of debt In fact, to grow the GDP of every country, you have to create debt. Personal debt, consumer debt, corporate debt, government debt, debt. It's going to collapse under its own weight at some point. Granted, the United States, since we, have the dollar and the dollar is the reserve currency of most of the world, is probably going to collapse last, but it's also going to collapse the hardest. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, right? That's the United States. So when it comes to the collapse of economic systems, now that I've studied it, I am pretty confident, just like with cyber attack, that our financial system is going to collapse. If you think that's far-fetched, all I can say is if you look back at the history of fiat currencies, which means a currency created by a government, backed by the guns of the government and the printing presses, and the belief and faith that our citizenry has in the ability for that fiat currency to live on and be viable, that's all it's backed by, and that has the ability to collapse. In fact, my point was, if you look at the history of fiat currencies, they all collapse eventually. They all go to zero. Most fiat currencies only last 30 to 50 years before they go to zero, whether it's through hyperinflation or the collapse of the country itself or, government overthrow. So if you think the dollar, the US dollar, is rock solid, you better think again. It's going to collapse. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And if all of your money is in the fiat banking system, and by the way, the laws are in place for banks to seize your deposits in order to keep the system going. It happened in Cyprus a few years ago, and it's going to happen in other countries. When it starts to collapse, if you think you're going to have access to your savings, if you even have any savings, you better think again. And before I get off this topic, there is a solution, by the way. It's Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies that are finite in size, that can't be inflated away, and that are outside of the control of any government or central bank of the world. If it all collapses, right now, the only viable alternative is either some kind of gold or silver standard, which is not likely to happen, or a Bitcoin standard, which I believe is much more likely to happen, which is why I own Bitcoin. My point is, the financial infrastructure of the world can collapse. And if you read anything about the Great Recession of 2008, it came really close to collapsing all over the world. I mean, the system almost completely imploded. Now, the government printed money and did stimulus and kicked the can down the road, but here we are, 12, 13, 14 years later, and the problem has only gotten bigger and worse, and it's only going to be nastier when it does all eventually collapse. So, I've been talking a lot. You can see there's a lot of things to think about. I don't expect you to necessarily study finances in the global economy and central banks and Bitcoin and permaculture and homesteading and off-gridding and solar power, on and on and on. It's too much, right? It's when you start going down that road, it can be very overwhelming. Personally, I kind of like it. The more you study, the more scary things get, unfortunately. And even though I'm an optimist, I'm also a realist. So I'm making preparations, and I hope you are too. So I guess my point is, for everyone watching this, whether you're a friend, a family, a stranger, another off-gridder, or none of those things, I think it's important for you to start to prioritize and value resiliency, preparedness, redundancy, which creates resiliency and preparedness, and to start to list out the different ways you can become more resilient and therefore more prosperous in your life. I actually keep a spreadsheet, and I'm happy to share it with you, a blank template that is, of all the different areas of my life. And my computer just froze up, so I'm not looking at it anymore. But just off the top of my head, there's obviously financial security, and there's things you can do to diversify. Have a little bit of gold, have a little bit of silver, have a little Bitcoin, have a little bit of cash under your mattress, don't have money in the big banks. Better to have your money in local credit unions and things like that. Because when Chase Bank and B of A start to implode, You don't want to go down with those big ships, trust me. So in finances, that's one area. In your physical health, improving the state of your health so that you don't have to rely on Western medicine, doctors, and a corrupt, broken medical system. Food, how to grow your own food, even if you're an apartment dweller. If you have a balcony and a pot, you can grow some damn tomatoes or carrots right on your balcony. Little things like that. It's not that it insulates you, but it gets you thinking, it gets you looking, it gets you in an action-oriented frame of mind, and that is a wonderful thing. So food resiliency, water resiliency. If you have a house in the suburbs, could you have a downspout that feeds a rain barrel that, at least gives you 50 gallons or 100 gallons of extra water? Can you have a bigger cistern like I have that holds thousands of gallons of water? Maybe, maybe not, but it's worth asking yourself that question. So food resiliency, water resiliency, energy resiliency, that's an easy one. You can go buy a Blue Eddy or Jackery little power supply unit that's essentially a solar generator. And yeah, you might have to spend a few $100, but if there's a power outage, it may charge your laptop and your cell phones and your emergency radios, if you have any of those, which you should, for a few weeks or, at least a few days. And a small investment of a few $100s in an energy power system or a generator or both can completely change what your experience might look like when calamity strikes eventually. So food, power, water, physical security is a big one. Being on 22 acres out here in the middle of the desert, I have security systems, and I'm going to do another video here soon on a few of those things. Reinforcing your doors, maybe having a weapon. If you don't like guns, that's okay. It doesn't have to be a gun. It could be a stun gun. It could be a machete. It could be a knife. It could be something like that. But having a way of defending yourself, certainly self-defense classes, maybe even de-escalation classes, so you don't have to get physical. Reinforcing the perimeter, putting up a fence to keep out the cows, to keep out the marauders, gates, lights, cameras, on and on. There's so many things you can do, and so many of them are under $10 solutions to improve your physical security. So there's probably more categories on my list. Certainly the stocking of food, the stocking of medicines in case, supply chain goes down, having some antibiotics on hand, having some aspirin on hand. We all saw that people like to stock up on toilet paper when, there's a coronavirus pandemic. But is toilet paper really the highest priority? No. How about having a deep freeze for more meat? How about having some frozen orange juice concentrate? Whatever. Food is an important one there because you need energy to function, right? And that brings me to what will probably be the last topic in this long tirade, which is permaculture. I don't know if you're familiar with permaculture. I'm not an expert, but I've watched a heck of a lot of videos about farmers or even suburbanites who are learning how to implement layered, self-reinforcing systems that create abundance. And that typically looks like something like capturing some rain, instead of letting it run off, letting it drip on some plants that provide you food, trees that provide you climate control, shelter, shade, things like that, to cool your house, passively cool your house via shade, letting that water percolate through the soil and enrich the water table, so that you basically green up your environment and grow food at the same time. And while permaculture is a huge topic, I see parallels between the principles of permaculture and growing food and having energy, food, water. There's parallels between that and financial permaculture. Financial permaculture is not even a thing, and maybe I just made that up. But the way permaculture implements systems that feed and reinforce synergy, I guess, is the word I'm reaching for here. Permaculture is based on the concepts of synergy and having complementary systems, right? Clustering different types of plants together so that it balances out the soil and provides the right kinds of nutrients and anchors the soil in the right way so you get the maximum production per square foot from your land or your balcony. In the same way, there are ways you can implement synergistic systems within your finances to create that resiliency, to create reinforcing mechanisms there. Your spending habits lead to savings, your savings lead to investments, your investments lead to more opportunities to, create resiliency in your life. Things like that. So I just hope that by listening to this video, I've started to get your brain thinking a little more along the lines of preparedness, resiliency, and now hopefully looking for ways where you can create synergies in your life and in your lifestyle so that these systems that are important to our survival start to reinforce one another, right? Believe it or not, there are ways to make your food growing reinforce your physical security, which reinforces your energy security, which reinforces your sense of community. I haven't even talked about that one in this video. Community, so you have skill sharing and bartering and things like that going on in the neighborhood around you, is also a huge part of both homesteading and prepping and permaculture. So it's good to have neighbors who are like-minded, and I think I do around here, and I'm learning more of them every day. Look for opportunities for synergy, complementary skill sets, complementary investments of time and energy so that you create just more abundance and prosperity and resiliency and preparedness in your life. Okay? So I'm going to stop there, and I guess I'll just conclude by saying the reason I am now off-grid in the desert trying to catch my own water, soon, eventually I'll be growing my own food. Not yet. I've got to build a structure and get the power and water systems going a little further before I can really delve into the world of food. But I'm studying and I'm reading about it, so mentally I'm preparing to go that route. The reason I'm doing all this, because I recognize that the world is fragile. You don't want to be fragile along with the rest of the world. Natural disasters, cybersecurity threats, financial collapse, civil war, pandemics, all are potential realities, or just physical disability, you getting injured, you getting divorced, you getting sick. Those are all real possibilities. And if you refuse to think about those types of possibilities now, if and when they happen, you're gonna be screwed. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. And I just want to put it out there and beg you, encourage you, and try to help you prepare for the most likely scenarios for your life, to research how to mitigate the risks related with those potential scenarios, and begin to implement some steps in your life the same way I'm implementing some steps here on my land and in my life, both professionally, financially, and in all the other systems that I've mentioned so far. That's it. I'm done talking. Thanks for watching. Can't wait to see your comments and questions. I'm definitely going to be paying attention and answering them both in the comments and in future videos. I'm Ryan with All Mine Ranch. Thanks for listening. Subscribe and goodbye. Okay, I lied. That wasn't the ending after all. There's one more topic I want to cover, and it's the idea of the highest and best use of your time and figuring out what for you is the highest and best use for your time. I talked about in your finances having the importance of having a monthly spending plan so that every dollar is working maximally on your behalf to create more abundance in your life and more resiliency and more strength and all of those things. Well, it doesn't just apply to finances, it applies to all of your time. Time, money, and energy are all really the same thing. So I actually keep a spreadsheet. I like spreadsheets. Well, I like lists. I don't like spreadsheets. I have a list of the activities that are the highest and best use of my time. And my list is going to be totally different from your list. If someone's having health challenges, then probably the highest and best use of their time is improving their health and solving those challenges. Mental health is included on that list. For some people, putting money in your 401k isn't the highest and best use of your time. It's giving it to a therapist to get your head in the right place and to work through past issues. That's totally fine. I mean, we all have our own list. But the point of this bonus section is to encourage you to create a list. So for me, things like learning about permaculture and earthworks that support growing things is high on my list. Getting industry certifications and furthering my education in IT and cybersecurity to maximize my salary and my income potential for my remaining working years. Really high on my list. Studying cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and really understanding how the financial system and the plumbing of the financial system, how it works. So if it does collapse, how can I be best prepared to withstand that storm that's going to be a really nasty storm if and when it comes to pass. Exercises on there, perhaps for some people, self-defense. If you live in a high crime area, maybe it's shooting lessons. I'm not going to say what's right for you, but for some people, learning to defend themselves in their home and their loved ones is the best and highest use of their time. There's a million of them. It could be driving classes. Certainly recreation and leisure and relaxation does have to factor in, because if a person is just working, learning, studying, building, creating nonstop, you can get burnt out. So if you're feeling burned out, then taking it easy and investing in a vacation might actually be the highest and best use of your time. But I find it enjoyable to actually create a list of those things. I like creating the list. I like reading the list. I like evaluating what percentage of my time I spend doing the items that are on that list, because it brings me comfort. Because I know that when I spend time and energy doing the things that are on my list, that are the highest and best uses of my time, which is a finite resource, time and energy, I just feel better about myself. I feel productive. I feel useful. I feel like I'm on the right path. I feel like I'm on target to achieve not only a great future, but it gives me a present moment feeling of doing the right thing, of the appropriate thing. We all have our beliefs about what's right and appropriate, so that's why you have to make your list. But please make an actual list and then give it, glance at it every now and again so that you're continuing to spend time on the things that bring you maximum reward, maximum benefit, maximum investment. And investment, after all, is, sacrificing present energy for an increase in future energy or the things that energy can bring you. Okay, so that's the concept that I really wanted to share with you. That was weird. My camera just shut down for no reason. So I'm encouraging you to think about that. In the next hour, let's say you turn off this video, what is the highest and best use of the next hour of your life? I don't know the answer, but I think you have an inkling of what the answer is. And if you're planning on doing something other than that, maybe you might want to rethink that and do the thing that is the highest and best use of your time. Okay? For some of you, it might be going to work to earn some income. That's fine. But in your leisure time, when you get free, what is the highest and best use of your time? Maybe you should make your own spreadsheet like I did. Start listing it out. And once you have 7, 8, 10 items on your list, learning a new skill, learning how to grow food, learning about permaculture, learning about the financial system, learning about cybersecurity. Maybe the highest and best use of your time is actually finally getting around to putting some darn security software on your tablets, phones, and laptops so that you don't get hacked. Or working on your credit score. Whatever the case may be, your answers are unique for you, but I want you to think about the highest and best use of your time. Start listing them out. That'll get the creative juices flowing, and hopefully you will start asking yourself in the next moment or in the next hour or when you wake up in the morning, what can I be doing? What is on the list? What should I be focused on that is going to produce long-term, tangible, positive benefits and results in your life? And then go do those things. I do that a lot. I try to be very intentional about my life and spend my time as wisely as I spend my money. The two things definitely go hand in hand. That's it. Now we're really done. Bye.